Brandon AIYUK just said on camera, by name and by destination, if I'm lying, cut me today and I'll sign with the Commanders tomorrow. And in a minute, I'm gonna tell you exactly why that move, if it actually happens, might be the worst mistake Adam Peters makes this offseason. But while everyone in the DMV is locked in on AIYUK, nobody's talking about what's happening quietly in Ashburn. Darren Payne is playing out a $90 million contract and the Commanders are already looking at the exit. $90 million. I'm going to show you the numbers that explain why this organization made that call a long time ago and who they're already counting on to fill that role. And to close it out, John Bates just landed at number 20 in the Commander Country roster rankings. If you hear that name and think, why is a tight end with 72 career catches getting that spot? Stay right there, because Zach Ertz, 13 years in this league, said something about Bates that changes how you have to see this entire offense. Raise hail. Go ahead and search that name on Google Images right now. Okay. I need y'all to listen to me for the next few minutes because this stopped being a rumor a long time ago. It stopped being a game. It stopped being some vague social media hint. Brandon AIYUK is in open war with the San Francisco 49ers, and he wants to come to Washington. Let me break down exactly what is happening here because there are a lot of layers and people are jumping to the wrong conclusions in both directions. Let's start from the real beginning of this whole thing. October 2024, AIYUK tears his ACL and MCL in his right knee in Week 7 against the Kansas City Chiefs. That is enough to end anyone's season, but what happened after that is where the actual separation between AIYUK and the 49ers starts. AIYUK did not report to the team facility to do his rehab work. He did not show up for team meetings. And the 49ers, in July of 2025, made the decision to void $27 million in guaranteed money from his contract because of those violations. He did not file a grievance against that decision. Why? According to his own explanation, because he believed that would make it easier for the team to eventually release him. And that is where this drama escalates to a completely different level. AIYUK drops a video this week and says, directly to camera, as that he has no agent, that he let his agent go back in November. And the reason he gives is that the agent who represented him also represented 49ers general manager John Lynch. That conflict of interest in his version is part of why everything played out the way it did. Now, there is a massive problem with that narrative. The NFLPA player agent database still shows him represented by Ryan Williams of Athletes First. If he had formally terminated his standard representation agreement, that would show up in the database. It does not, which either means AIYUK does not fully understand how the termination process works, or there is something else in this story that has not come out yet. But here is the most important thing, the one that actually defines his entire legal situation right now. AIYUK has never filed the reinstatement paperwork with the NFL. And until he does that, the 49ers have zero obligation to release him. Zero. It is like sitting outside a door waiting for someone to open it from inside without realizing you have to ring the doorbell yourself first. That is, in practical terms, exactly what is happening here. And all of this is going on while AIYUK is doing the following on social media. He posts a video saying, "And I am not making this up. Go Commanders, raise hail." He posts stories from Washington, D.C. He films videos wearing a Commander's hat. And this week, he said on camera, word for word, "If I am lying or if I am capping, tell those boys to cut me today and I will sign with the Commanders tomorrow. We will see who is capping." Bro, somebody pinch me. That is a level of directness that has no precedent. That is not a player being evasive in a press conference. That is a star NFL wide receiver telling his current team on video with a destination named to cut him. And then he goes even further. He said that when the Commanders visit San Francisco on October 19th, that will be the only time he steps foot in that building. Week 6, in our building, with us in the stands. Now let me separate what I feel as a fan from what I see when I actually analyze this with some cold logic. As a fan, this is electric. The idea of Jaden Daniels with Brandon AIYUK on the field is the kind of thing that keeps you up at 1 in the morning running snap count calculations in your head. AIYUK is 28 years old. Before his injury in the 7 games he played in 2024, he was on a pace that put him among the best receivers in football. 5 seasons in San Francisco, 294 receptions, 4,305 yards, 25 touchdowns. 14.6 yards per catch. That is not a system player. That is a guy who creates separation regardless of what you put around him. The real question for us as fans is this: can he actually get here? And the honest answer is we do not know yet, because there is a bureaucratic barrier that AIYUK himself built by not filing the right paperwork. And there is a second question that nobody is asking loudly enough. How is that knee actually doing? Because you can get hyped about all the social media theater you want, but if AIYUK arrives in Ashburn with a knee that is not right by training camp 2027, that changes everything. Look, I could be wrong here, but my read on this situation is that it resolves eventually. AIYUK files the paperwork. The 49ers release him because they have no real incentive to keep him on the roster in this condition. And when that happens, the most interesting conversation is going to be whether Adam Peters is willing to give him the contract he wants given the knee history and the history of conflict with organizations. But that is a conversation for another day. Today the news is that Brandon AIYUK is posting Raise Hail on his stories, and the 49ers are sitting there trying to maintain institutional dignity while their star receiver torches them in public. And that, fam, is high-level sport. Speaking of players who are eventually leaving Washington, though in a much quieter and more orderly way, we need to talk about Darren Payne, because the reports from today confirm what a lot of people inside the organization already knew. The Commanders are going to let Payne play out his current deal and let him explore free agency in 2027. Let me be straight about this, because the simple narrative of the Commanders just letting their star tackle walk is missing some important context. Payne signed a $90 million contract. He has been in Washington since he was drafted in the first round. He has played alongside Chase Young and Jonathan Allen in stretches when this defense still had a real identity in the interior, but the 2025 season was, being honest, disappointing in multiple ways. The Commanders' defense was one of the worst in the league, and Payne's role in that is not something you can just ignore. He finished the year with 3 sacks, 46 total tackles, and 5 passes defended. That is an interior tackle on a $90 million deal, producing numbers that do not justify that kind of long-term investment. And then there is the Amon-Ra St. Brown incident. Payne threw a punch at the Lions receiver on the field. That kind of moment, regardless of how you see it within the context of football intensity, is exactly the type of image a franchise trying to shift its culture has to manage very carefully. And the decision not to pursue an extension is, in part, a consequence of that. But here is what I think a lot of people are overlooking. The Commanders do not need to panic about Payne eventually leaving, because this organization already moved smart to rebuild this defensive line from the inside. They signed Odafe Oweh to a long-term deal. Leo Chenal is also locked in. And in the 2026 draft, Washington used their first-round pick on Sonny Styles, a player with the athletic profile to be genuinely disruptive from the interior. The draft capital and the free agency spending are sending a very clear message. This organization is already looking past Payne and has been for a while. What I find interesting about the new scheme under Durante Jones as defensive coordinator is this: Jones does not come from the same philosophical tree as Joe Witt. The 2025 defense was a disaster, largely because of a lack of schematic cohesion. An interior tackle who is not playing at his best level actually has better odds of producing in a scheme that asks the right things of him. If Payne shows up to training camp motivated, knowing this is his contract year, in a new system where pre-snap disguise is a priority, a redemption season is absolutely possible. Will he do it? I genuinely do not know, but the possibility is real. And if he does not, the organization already has the exit path mapped out. The issue I actually see is different. If Payne has a down year and the new defense is still finding its legs in 2026, that puts real extra pressure on Jer'Zhan Newton and on Jones's entire system to deliver results quickly. That is a pressure the team is going to have to manage carefully. The final read on Payne is this: he is not the engine of this defense in 2027, and the organization knows it. His best case scenario is a solid season that sends him to the Chargers, the Jaguars, the Panthers, or the Lions on a 2-year veteran deal. For Washington, the future of that defensive line already has names on it, and Darren Payne is not one of them. Oh, night. And to close things out, I need to talk about something that is not going to generate the same headlines as AIYUK and is not going to spark the same debate as Payne, but which is honestly one of the most important breakdowns a Commanders fan can do before training camp. John Bates just landed at number 20 on the Commander Country roster ranking. And some fans are going to see that number and think, why are we giving space to a tight end who barely has 72 catches in his entire NFL career? Let me explain why that reaction is exactly the problem. Bates came in on a 4th round pick in the 2021 draft. In 82 games with Washington, he has 72 receptions for 695 yards and 3 touchdowns. If those are the numbers that matter to you when evaluating this player, you are watching the wrong film. The numbers that actually matter for Bates are in his PFF blocking grade, in the run game snaps where he seals the edge so Jaden Daniels can execute, and in David Blau's ability to call heavy personnel packages without telegraphing anything to the opposing defensive coordinator. Here is the concept I want you to understand. In modern football, tight ends have increasingly become space weapons. Everybody wants the superstar receiver, the mismatch athlete, the guy who makes a defensive coordinator sweat in coverage matchups. And that makes sense, but there is a trap in that thinking. When 70% of your tight ends are specialized receivers and 30% are blockers, that 30% becomes a red flag for the defense every time they step on the field. Watch out. Heavy formation. It is going to be a run or a short play action. The defender already knows where to look. Bates breaks that signal because Bates can enter any formation, do his blocking job so dominantly that the defense has to respect him in the run game and simultaneously be available as a target in the passing game if the defense overcommits to stopping the run. It is not that he is going to make plays in space. It is that his physical presence forces an extra defender to account for him, which opens space for Okonkwo or Ben Sinnott to operate on the other side. Zach Ertz, who has 13 years in this league and has seen almost every tight end in this sport, called Bates the most dominant blocking tight end he had ever seen in his entire career. That is not someone talking without knowing what they are talking about. That is someone who shared a locker room with him and saw him work up close every single day. What concerns me about this picture, being completely honest, is the depth question. If Bates gets hurt, the SI article lays it out clearly. Ben Sinnott would have to shift to that in-line blocking role, which kills every bit of upside he carries in the passing game. Okonkwo would face the same situation. The true depth at that specific position, the pure in-line blocking tight end, is almost non-existent on this current roster. That is not a problem with an easy solution on the free agent market today. Elite blockers at that spot are rare, and precisely because they are rare, because the market undervalues them relative to receivers, is why Bates carries that $21 million deal that some fans question. So before training camp has y'all out here calling for more receiving weapons and more athletic flash in the tight end room, remember this: the work Bates does is the kind you only notice when it is not there. And fam, Commanders fans have spent way too many years knowing exactly what it feels like when the foundational pieces of a system are not working. Now, one more thing before I close out. The fourth story today came from a poll that ran on Blogging the Boys, which for those who do not know is the Dallas Cowboys fan blog. The question was basically which players would be the ideal steals from the Cowboys for opposing fans. And the most common answers from Commanders fans in that poll were CeeDee Lamb and Brandon Aubrey. Look, I get the CeeDee Lamb argument. He is one of the best receivers on the planet, and putting him next to Jaden Daniels is a fun thought experiment. But Lamb just had what for him is considered a down year at 1,077 yards. He is coming off an ankle injury, and Dallas now has George Pickens as their number 2 option too. That is not a player they are moving. Brandon Aubrey is the more interesting one. Best kicker in the NFL right now, 6 field goals from 60 yards or more in his career. The only kicker to make the Pro Bowl in each of his first 3 seasons. He just signed a 4-year $28 million extension with Dallas, so that is not happening either. But what I think is healthy in this whole exercise is that Commanders fans are thinking about those kinds of players, because CeeDee Lamb and Brandon Aubrey are not on teams that are picking in the middle of the first round. Those are Super Bowl contention players. And the fact that we are having that conversation, even as a fantasy, says something about where this fan base believes this franchise is heading. That is everything I have for today, fam. AIYUK wants to be here, and the only real obstacle is a bureaucratic paperwork issue he created himself. Pain is gone eventually, and this organization is already built to handle that. And John Bates, the man nobody mentions in fantasy debates, might be the difference between an offensive line that functions and one that cracks in the moments that matter most. Raise hail, always. If this video gave you something, drop the like, hit subscribe, and tell me down in the comments. Do you think Adam Peters goes all in on AIYUK when he hits the market? Or does Washington build around what they already have in that receiver room? I want to read every single response. See you in the next one.